Hello, everyone. I'm Cindy Snow, and I coordinate the writing and language tutors at GCC. And this panel consists of a group of tutors who are going to talk about study skills, time management, all of that sort of stuff. And what's exciting about having them do this is they're either current GCC students or they were GCC students. So they're very familiar with the sorts of things you're going through as you're studying. And I want to put in a little plug for peer tutoring. Peer tutoring is a free service at GCC. In the COVID environment, it's completely online through Google Meet. And you can just go to the GCC website, do a search for peer tutoring, and there's a big request an appointment button and a number of resources on those pages as well. So without further ado, I want the different panel members to introduce themselves. You want to start, Ellie?
Sure. So my name is Ellie Misra. I tutor writing in Spanish. At GCC, I majored in social sciences, and I'm now a sociology major at UMass Amherst.
Thanks. I'm just going on my screen. Samantha?
Hi, I'm Samantha. I'm a writing tutor and I study English here at GCC.
Great. Rafaela?
Hi, I'm Rafaela. I am a writing and Spanish tutor here, and I'm studying social sciences and Spanish.
And Megan?
Hi, I'm Megan. I am a psychology major and writing tutor here at UMass, UCC.
Great. And as I mentioned to those who came in, those who just came in, they didn't get to hear it. This is a panel of GCC peer tutors in writing, and we're here to talk about study skills, time management, success strategies. So the tutors have talked about the things that they want to share. We want to save some time at the end for questions and strategies you all might want to share. I want to put out there one caveat. These are suggestions. They're ideas that have worked for either the tutors or for the students they work with. Everybody's different. Everyone needs to adapt to their own needs and strategies and ways of learning. So just listen with an idea that you may want to grab some of the practices they're suggesting. You may want to adapt others, and some may not be the ones that work for you, but they're going to share from their experiences. So let's talk. We've got 4 categories. We've got approaching assignments, time management, attending to yourself, sort of personally, self-care, and general organization. And some of them overlap. But let's start with time management. Who would like to begin to share some of what they use as strategies around time management?
So I always thought that, or I found that the most important thing for me when I'm managing my time is that I break my study time up into smaller, hopefully regular chunks, so that I don't get too tired out in like a super long study session. I've sort of figured out that about 1 hour at a time works for me, which might not be very long if you have a large mountain of homework. So I like to plan multiple hour-long chunks throughout the day, maybe broken up by other activities or little breaks, in order to maximize my efficiency when I'm trying to get homework done. And that has probably been like the biggest revelation for me in figuring out how to do my schoolwork comfortably.
Thanks, Rafaela. So it's don't plow through hour after hour, but break it up into doable chunks. Who'd
Yeah.
like to add to that? Go ahead, Megan.
So similar to Rafaela, I really like breaking assignments down into multiple chunks. So I will consider even like knowing when an assignment is due and reading an assignment sort of like step 1 of an assignment, and then going through, because like if you just think you have a discussion forum due on Friday, you might try to save it till Friday, but then you go to open it up and it's like you have to read an article and these are the questions to consider. And one thing I like to do at the beginning of the semester, especially that's been huge for time management for me, is to spend the first couple of weeks keeping track of how long the types of assignments take, like reading chapters, doing discussion forums, quizzes, all of that. Because then when I go to build my sort of like weekly plan for when I do my homework, I have a realistic sense of how long it's going to take me.
So you can better plan your time because you invested that time early on in figuring out how long things would take. Great, thanks. Ellie, did you want to add to this time management chunk?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that's been really helpful for me is figuring out what times of day I'm able to work on certain types of assignments and then planning my day around that. So I find that I can't do really long, dense readings or focus on writing during the middle of the day. So instead, I'll try to use that time for watching lecture videos or maybe working on a forum post or research, and then spend the evening on those reading and writing assignments. And this is different for different people, but kind of paying attention to when you work best is super helpful.
So it's not that you block out certain times and say, I can't study then because I'm a morning person, so I can't study at night, but you say, what can I study at night and what can I study in the morning? What works best at different times of the day? Thanks. I also, Ellie, I remember you talking a little bit about getting a weekly rhythm going for your studies. Maybe you could say something about that.
Right. So this semester specifically, maybe the second week of classes, I was just finding myself really overwhelmed with assignments. For one class in particular, a theory class that just had a lot of dense readings and writing. And so after a couple days of feeling really overloaded, I sat down and looked at all of my syllabi and figured out when do readings, writing assignments, forum posts tend to be due, and sort of organized a weekly rhythm for that. So, for example, one of my classes, I need to read a chapter, watch 2 lecture videos, make a forum post, and that's stacked toward the beginning of the week. Other classes have assignments stacked to the end of the week. So for that class, I read a chapter over the weekend, watch lectures on Monday, make a forum post on Tuesday, and then I can focus on other ones.
Yep. So you have a pattern going, and then I would assume it gets predictable, and then it's easier to stick with it too. Yeah. Megan, let's see, there was something else. Oh, you had talked about distractions and time management linked to distractions you might have in your own household, for example.
Yeah, so definitely something that I ran into. I've moved, so that's actually kind of been like a different negotiation. Whereas before I was in an apartment downtown, and I would have to time out sort of when I was doing very concentration intensive assignments to when it was going to be quieter. There was definitely a level of activity going on around that I found very distracting. And now I have to negotiate with my partner who's also in school. So trying to carve out a physical space, if you have one, I recognize that that's like a privilege to be able to have like a quiet space that you can sort of be in charge of. Um, but as much as you can, carving out a sort of dedicated space so you can kind of switch gears into that mindset. And if you can't do that, try to, I think even just set some things up to like make it look like a space, put your pencils out. But if you have a lot of distractions around you and you can't just sort of quietly create a space, to try to negotiate with housemates if you have them to try to say this is when I need to study. And otherwise, if it's really like not a possibility to negotiate that, to try to pay attention to the rhythms that are going around throughout the day and figure out when it is quieter, and then really seize on that in order to do anything that requires, I think, more concentration and fewer distractions.
Sort of collaborating with whatever's going on around you to figure out how you can carve out time for yourself and probably what fits into that amount of time that you have around what else is going on. Thanks. Any of you want to add anything else on time management? Or if people have questions, you're welcome to ask them. And then otherwise we'll move on to some general organization bits. Any additions? Go ahead, Raphael.
I remembered one thing that I actually think Ellie brought up one time, the idea of if you need to write your schedule or your study times down and maybe post it on the fridge of your house or give it to some of your housemates so that they have like a really clear awareness of certain times, if they are open to that. But that can be like a helpful reminder, and taking the burden off other people to remember when you need the time. That sounded like a cool idea.
It is a great idea. I know before we did this panel, before I had to say to my husband, for the next hour, please don't interrupt, just to make it clear that this is a concentrated time and sometimes that communication can really help. All right, let's talk about general organization, which overlaps a bit with time management, I recognize. Who would like to say something about that? Go ahead, Samantha.
Okay, I was just gonna jump in and mention that I use a planner. It helps with time management, but generally also being organized and um, having mine personally is laid out in a week by week basis. And that is helpful because once I'm kind of plugging in my assignments and things that I have to do outside of school as well, you really start to see when you have free time that could be spent studying, and especially if it's a week where you have more things going on. Um, like, oh, I see I'm really busy towards the end of the week, so I should probably take on more during the beginning of the week. You could do those sorts of things. And also, um, kind of as a way to keep track of like weekly goals.
Samantha, do you use a paper planner, like a little spiral?
I have a little
know?
book.
Because I know some people like to use their phones and other people really like the idea of paper that sometimes gives you a little more space. But people like phones because they have them with them all the time. So you can adapt.
I try to bring my planner with me, but I prefer having a physical planner because it doesn't get like lost in my phone, and it's also bigger, which helps me see. Um, and also, it's really easy on your phone to get distracted by notifications and things. And if you're trying to have it be study time, it's best to have it just be gone.
Right. And the planner's just for planning. Yeah. 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 Ellie, you were going to say something too. Sorry, go ahead. And then Megan.
Yeah, sure. So to add to what Samantha was saying, something that I found helpful, I started doing this, I think last fall because I was just struggling to keep track of assignments, is to keep just a running list of assignments. And this is separate from the planner. So I have like a small spiral notebook where each week I'll set up a checklist. So at the end of the week, I'll go through syllabi and Moodle and kind of pull out what readings do I need to do, what writing assignments do I have coming up, etc. Make a list of those and color code it by class. So each class is a color assigned to it, and then tutoring and personal things have separate colors assigned to them. So that way I can kind of visually keep separate what's going on. And then day to day, I'll pull from that like master list of assignments and identify usually 5 or so things that I want to get done on the given day. And as Samantha was saying, kind of patterning it based on how much time you have in a given day.
So you've got the weekly list and then you've got the daily list, and you do some color coding so you can spot right away visually what you want to focus on. I wonder if the color coding also helps, like if you're constantly doing green but not red, and you might say to yourself, oh, I've spent a lot of time on economics but nothing on politics. And the visual can sort of cue you into that pretty readily, I bet.
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that's been helpful about having the weekly list, which actually I have right next to me. So this is the system that I've been using. And so that kind of lets me see, how much I have done relative to how much I have left to do for the week. And if I've been completely neglecting one class, kind of trying to figure out what I need to prioritize is easier for me when I have that visual representation.
I bet there's also some sort of sense of self-satisfaction because you get to check things off. You get to feel a sense of accomplishment, which is kind of important when the list is really long, especially. Megan?
So, like Ellie, I live for color coding. I'm a very visual person, so I find that blocking out things in colors helps me sort of get a sense quickly. If there's a lot of green on my calendar, for example, that's a tutoring intensive day, so I don't have to read it. It kind of blurs together. I get distracted. I like the bright colors. And I will color code my calendar and my notebooks for a class. So orange is my research methods class, so my notebook is orange too. So just trying to keep things separate. And I like I prefer the monthly calendar because I've tried planners and have tried the phone thing. The phone, like Samantha said, I will get distracted. I will open up Instagram, Pinterest, everything but my calendar. I've also found that with a planner, it's so cute. I love it. I won't open it. It just has to be like plastered in front of my eyes for me to pay attention to it. And then, as well as Ellie, like I will pull things off of my weekly, sort of like I'll look at my week and I have to plan my month out because time is really just a vague abstract concept, and I've got to plan that out, so I can sort of get a hold of what is going on. But I have a whiteboard next to me, that's just like every time I look up from the computer, it's right there in front of me, and I will do a 2-day to-do list, because I'm really good at putting things off. And I find that if I write things for 2 days, if it's Monday and I feel like I can do this Tuesday, I can write right in front of me, look at all the things you have to do Tuesday. You can't do this Tuesday.
Right, keeps you a little bit more realistic so you've got monthly planner, weekly planner, 2-day, and the daily one too. Yep. I want to mention that if you go to the GCC website and go to the peer tutoring page, there's a little on the ribbon, it says online resources. And if you check those, we've got a lot of calendars on there. I know a lot of people can find them just by doing a search online. Some you have to pay, some may not be the sort of visual representation that you want. And we've got a few there. We've got a monthly one, we've got a weekly one, we've got a template for daily. And Raphael has pointed out some that are writable PDFs. And so you can use those and type right on them. So you can do a general look, but if you want some of these tools, they're right there on the peer tutoring web page on the GCC site. Rafaela, did you want to add something?
I had just one more. So this is what my like homework planner looks like, and these are each days of the week. And so I will write each assignment that I'm going to do on each day, and then I'll write the due date just next to it so I can remember. And then what's cool about this one is that it also has like a big monthly calendar, so I might write big due dates like on there.
Long-term things. I think you've also mentioned, Rafaela, how important it is to use resources on a Moodle page for a course, for example. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, a couple of things. Just something I figured out about studying in the online environment specifically is to really try and remember to take advantage of all of the resources that your instructor posts online on their Moodle page. I think in the beginning, it's easy to forget that maybe some of the slideshows that they show in class or some instructional documents or whatever it is are always on Moodle, and you can always access them and review them, and use those for studying. And sometimes like I will just go through my course's Moodle page and like click on everything that I see just to make sure there's nothing I'm forgetting or missing. Yeah, I think that's something to remember. And I also had a thought, about how to plan assignments. Part of my assignment planning process is sort of like Ellie keeping like a long list of everything to remember. But also when I'm planning my week ahead, I like to open up assignments on my Moodle that I'm not necessarily going to start yet, even especially if it's like a big intimidating assignment, just so that I know what I'm in for, and just so that I know if I have to split it up over like 3 days, or if I could do it in one sitting, or just what kind of assignment it's going to be, so that I'm prepared. And I sort of learned that the hard way by putting off even looking at assignments and then being surprised at what was inside them. So I make sure to always look at assignments before I'm actually going to sit down and do them. And it also makes it easier to sit down and approach the assignment if you are prepared for what you're going to find in there.
Sure. And I remember, Megan, you talking a bit about, and we're morphing into sort of approaching assignments too, but you talked a bit about how you separate your time between getting ready and actually doing the assignment. Maybe this is a good time to talk a little about that.
Yeah, so I tend to what I've learned about myself, having been at GCC for a few years, is that I require a certain amount of incubation time. So before I go into something like writing, even shorter writing assignments, it's really important that I have some time to think about, like, what do I want my topic to be, and also sitting on it to generate some, like, thoughtful reactions. But even if it's not a writing assignment like that, I consider just opening up Moodle and reading an assignment and knowing when it's due to be like step one of an assignment. And I will break that away from even like starting the assignment. But so I have an assignment, like a discussion forum this week, for example, and I opened it up. Like I know when it's due now. It's like due Friday. I opened it up today, Tuesday, to read through it. I know I have to independently locate an article. So that's step two. And then it's going to be locate the article, then read the article, and then write it. And if I were going to try to cram that in all on Friday, I'm not going to do a great job. I need some time to think about it. I'm going to be rushed, and that's a lot of time for me. So I find it easier personally to just try to break down assignments, read things in chunks, break down assignments into different pieces. That way, if I get stuck, I'm not going to get overwhelmed, and it's not going to run into completing the assignment. I can get distracted and walk away.
And it sounds like then you don't feel like you have to do all the steps in the assignment in one fell swoop, in one sitting. You get familiar with what's required, and then you can break it down a little more in a way that
Yeah.
works for you.
Well, it's like Ellie said as well. I find that certain times of day, I'm better and faster and more concentrated with certain tasks. So I'll do that as well. I'll kind of match it out. I know that morning and evening are the only times that I'm like a good fast writer. If I try to do a writing assignment in the middle of the afternoon, it's a slog. But that's a great time for me to do things like reading and research. So I'll kind of know that and save the tasks that are easier for me to do in that middle part of the day, and save the higher concentration things for that very narrow part of the day where I can do them efficiently.
And it sounds like this is something I'm hearing from multiple people too, the business of making the list, making the plans, determining which part of the day matches with which assignment, investing the time in figuring out when that work is going to happen based on what's going on in your household, or what else, what ways you learn best, what times of the day are best for you. And I hear this big endorsement of paper planners too, which I find really interesting. I love paper planners, but I think of younger people as often wanting to use something else, but repeatedly here I hear a lot about the paper planners, which is interesting. Ellie, did you want to add something to this section?
Yeah, definitely. So to go off of what Megan and Rafaela said, I also find it really helpful to look at assignments up front, get a sense of what I'm in for, and then for me, the next step is just start a document. Often I'll copy and paste the assignment guidelines into that, and then I'll start adding things. So initially that'll be general ideas for a topic, and then I'll start adding in links to sources, pulling quotes from sources, adding in little ideas of how I'm going to structure the essay or assignment, or even just a forum post. And so that gives me some time to think about it before I have to dive into writing. And it also lets me identify, where am I confused? Where do I feel like I need extra help? So another strategy that I use and that I often will suggest to tutees is going to professors' office hours or emailing your professor really early in the assignment process, just to check, if your topic is appropriate for the assignment. Sometimes I'll choose a topic that's too broad. So I find that talking to an instructor early in the process helps me determine, is this topic too big for the scope of this essay? Should I narrow it down? How can I narrow it down? And in addition to making sure that you're meeting the assignment guidelines, that also kind of helps you identify where you're confused in how you're explaining it. So talking to another person forces you to articulate your idea. And if you're finding holes, it's better to find them out now than when you're trying to write the conclusion.
It's a good point. And if you find you want to talk to a tutor, you can make an appointment with a tutor, even at just the talking stage, to talk about an assignment, whether it's a paper or a presentation or whatever it is. But that encouragement to get in and talk with an instructor early, it's so much better when that's clarified before a draft of a paper, for example, is written. And then you find out, oh, rats, I didn't follow the guidelines and I did all that writing and now I have to start again. So I'm hearing these patterns. I'm just jotting down some notes. The investment in planning, knowing yourself and your good time of the day, breaking things into pieces, maybe talking to others if it helps you generate ideas, whether it's the instructor or peers. And also, I've heard a few people say giving yourself time for the ideas to incubate. So rather than, I mean, everybody knows this, rather than do the assignment the night before it's due, do little pieces perhaps and planning so that the ideas can percolate in you before you actually do the final product. Anyone want to add to that?
Yeah, I could
Samantha?
just jump in. I just wanted to kind of like piggyback a little bit on what other people are saying, especially Ellie, about talking to other people about assignments. Oops, sorry, my alarm just went off. Anyway, I think whenever I get a large assignment, like a research paper or some other assignment that I'm going to be spending a lot of time on, I think it's really helpful to talk to other people about it, as a way to sort of get engaged with what I'm learning. Because if I'm only thinking about it when I'm working on it, I'm not going to be making as many connections as I would if I'm kind of talking about it over dinner, or I'm on a walk with my mom and we're just chatting about it. And then as I'm kind of telling her what I'm thinking of and how I'm thinking of structuring this, I kind of start to see like, oh, and this is another thing that I haven't thought of, but I just thought of. And it's kind of like a way of pre-writing, I guess. So just adding that in there.
Yep, thank you. It's like priming the pump, doing what you need to do to get ready to do the assignment rather than leaping right into it without any of that planning or preparation or just getting the juices flowing for ideas.
I
And
agree. And
Rafa, go ahead, Samantha. Sorry.
I just think that however you can find a way to engage with what you're learning about, that is really helpful, I think, to making it be something that you can do well on because you're getting excited about it and not just something that you have to do.
Right. And maybe talking to other people helps you get excited that way, or at least generates ideas that make you think, I can do this, you know, and it's not just an assignment to check off, but something you want to engage with. Thanks. So Rafaela, this might be a good time to talk about how you approach assignments and share an example.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so this is, yes, I think a good introduction to a method that I figured out for how to look at an assignment, understand exactly what it's asking, and complete it. So I'm just gonna take a minute to figure out how to share my screen now, or it's just gonna take a minute to get it all set up. So here it should be this, and then I'm just going to make it large. So, and hopefully it pops up sometimes this. Okay, I can see it. Can everyone else see it? Okay, good. And I just might have to consult my notes here. So this is an example that I made for how I literally and kind of mentally break down assignment sheets. This here, De Donde Vengo Yo, is, this is a real assignment for a Spanish composition, or like an essay, a written thing for a Spanish course that I took at GCC. And so what I've noted here is that throughout this whole assignment, there are instructions for different types of, for 3 different types of requirements for this assignment. And I've color coded those different types of requirements. I've called one content. So what this written piece is supposed to be about, what the subject matter will be. And then I've called blue language and grammar requirements. So that is going to be Spanish concepts that need to be included in this piece of writing. And then the third green one is formatting and style. So how the paper should be formatted and how it should be, what it should be proofread for and stuff like that. And I'll just give some examples.
Rafaela, can I interrupt for a second? I
Yeah.
just want to clarify that the assignment that you're given is just the left page we see, and the right page is all your work in pulling apart that assignment.
Yes, exactly. And also, so I personally color coded this assignment. It came to me just like in normal black text. So I colored everything to show this example. So, and when I approach an assignment, especially say a writing assignment that requires like lots of different elements to be included, it is totally mind-boggling to me, and I need to see it visually. And I personally like love this bullet pointed list form of things that need to be included in a writing assignment, and that's why I do this. And I appreciate this when an instructor has bullet points in the assignment. But so what I noticed when I was looking at this assignment is that there are different types of instructions located throughout the assignment in different parts of it. So I noticed that there were some formatting and style instructions in the top paragraph, like write a page, so a single page, double spaced, and then also some stylization notes in the last paragraph. Organize your thoughts so that the ideas flow smoothly from one to the other. Edit your work for errors of spelling and accent, verb form, noun, adjective, agreement. And then these points to edit my work for, I just want to see those in a bullet pointed list as well. And that's the same for, say, the content. There might be instructions here, like you are writing a letter to a government official. And then there are some listed here. You need to include a description of the land and geographical features, and then some grammar requirements like subjunctive with expressions of emotion and unit vocabulary and such will be in other places in the assignment. And I like to list them all here like that. I hope that's clear enough. And I also just wanted to note that this sort of assignment breakdown can be applied to any written assignment that you have or any assignment. It could be a writing English assignment or a science research project. And it doesn't necessarily have to be for writing assignment. It could just be any assignment sheet that you have. And if we had hard paper copies of assignments, I might go through the assignment with different colored highlighters and highlight things that I know need to be included. And then another thing that I do is, so after I complete the assignment, I will go back to this list that I've made and I will use this just as a checklist, and I will make sure that every single bullet point is checked off. And if something is missing, for example, if I notice that I can't find any vocabulary from the unit in my writing, I'll go back, add some vocabulary, and then check this off the list. And a couple, just a couple other things I wanted to note about this is that it might be hard to figure out like how to categorize each type of instruction. And that is totally okay. And you might not need a ton of different categories, but I just thought of sort of the first basic question that you can ask about the assignment or ask yourself is, what is this assignment telling me I need to include in my final product? What do I need to include? What is required? Or it might be, what steps do I need to take? What steps is this assignment outlining? And you can start by just making a list of those things. And then also, last note is that going through assignments and figuring out what the different types of instructions are is something that you can do with a peer tutor and peer tutoring. And it would be super fun.
Yeah, tutors have interesting ideas of what's fun, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Rafaela. Does anyone have a question about what she just shared? And I should note that Rafaela has done this to share with everyone, but when we were talking together, the tutors and I, and when we talk in our weekly meetings, this is this sort of strategy is repeated. People say, I might get an assignment, it's a full page of text, and my first task is to break it into doable bits, to sort of translate it into my own words. And then what she's shown here is then you have a checklist. So it's something that we hear. It's like reorganizing the assignment to fit your thought pattern, breaking it into doable bits, and then using it as a checklist afterwards. I hear that from lots of tutors that's how they approach their assignments. And as Rafaela said, many tutoring appointments start with this so that it can save students time later on because they've worked out exactly what they need to do and aren't going down sort of the wrong path and then realizing it later on.
Mhm.
So thanks, Rafaela.
Yeah. And then, so I'll just stop sharing. Yeah, and it sort of gives you a sense of if there's a part of the assignment that you don't understand or that you have questions about, you can figure out what part of the assignment that is, and then maybe contact your instructor about it or whatever that is.
Good point. One thing we didn't talk about, and any tutor could chime in on this, is do you tend to approach your most difficult assignments first or your easiest ones first? Like, how do you determine, you have this list, how do you determine what the order is going to be besides what time of the day works best for you?
Yeah. Oh,
Go
Ellie.
ahead, Ellie. Oops, sorry.
So I guess I kind of do both, and that when I have difficult assignments, I will look at them up front. I'll do the kind of like rough outline that I mentioned before, just getting ideas down on a page. And then I'll step away from those and kind of not put pressure on myself to get anything real done with them. I'll try to get through easier assignments and then come back to the difficult assignments after I've built up some momentum and built up some confidence, doing things like readings, forum posts, watching lectures that don't take a huge amount of brain power. So that's been really helpful for me this semester.
Thanks. Did you want to add to that, Rafaela?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I just learned for myself that I really like to start, if I have a long to-do list, I just really like to start with the smallest or easiest thing, which might feel counterintuitive or might be the opposite of other advice that's out there. But sometimes it's hard for me to start like a big intimidating assignment if I already have a long to-do list. But if I start with a short, easy thing, then I get to check it off my list and feel a sense of accomplishment and feel like my whole list is then shorter and more approachable. So that's my one tip.
There's some sort of metacognition going on there, like reflecting on your own process and what'll work for you. Oh, I'll get confidence if I do small things first. And other people, I remember having advice from a supervisor one time who said, first thing in the morning, I get the task done that I don't want to do. And then they're not sitting on my shoulder, sort of, bugging me throughout the day. So different people have different strategies for determining what they do first. But the thing is, you all talk about making that determination consciously. Megan?
My biggest thing is whether I want to do something or not. So I have a much easier time engaging and immersing myself into assignments that I find like personally interesting. So for example, right now I'm taking research methods for psychology, and I'm taking a bio course. And one is arguably more difficult and requires a lot more like work, and there's a lot of different floating parts that have to tie in. But because I'm interested in it, it is so much easier for me to spend hours on that. And then I ended up saving all of my bio for the end of the week. So that's something that I've noticed about myself this semester. So I sort of what Ellie said in terms of more difficult assignments, or in my case, the ones that just really don't hold my attention, is to, yeah, break them into smaller chunks. Like, I really don't want to do this, but I could do it for 10 or 20 minutes right now, and then I'm making progress on it and not totally ignoring it, but I'm not overwhelming myself with boredom.
Right. Not doing so much of it that you're just not happy doing it at all. Yeah. So we should probably take maybe 5 minutes to talk about this last category that came up when you all were talking about what you'd like to share, which is the section of self-care. And then we'll have time for if people have questions or want to add after that. So this section here on self-care came up when we were talking about how do people succeed in their studies. And I don't know who would like to start with that.
I could jump in.
Good.
Yeah, I think that I'm going to use an example from last semester, and this happens a lot actually, but I find that a lot of the times when I see myself getting more stressed out by all of what I have to do, or see myself start to maybe miss an assignment deadline, those are also going to be the times that I am not taking care of my body in the right way, like not drinking enough water, or not eating all the meals in a day that I have to, or not leaving the house at all to go outside and like just get some exercise. And it's very easy to just justify like, I'll eat dinner when I'm done with this. It's okay that I skipped breakfast earlier, and like I'll do better tomorrow, and like thinking of things like that as not being very important, but they actually have a huge impact on your productivity and how you feel, and how you feel impacts whether or not you're going to actually do your assignments, and put in the work and put in the effort to make them be your best work. So I think that like if I find myself getting stressed, I'll kind of think, okay, am I drinking enough water? How many glasses of water have I had today? Or have I left the house yet? Okay, I need to just stop what I'm doing and go for a walk around the block, and then I can come back to it. But just taking care to pay attention to that stuff, because it's very easy to not pay attention to it, but it has a huge impact on your productivity.
So you're reminding us that self-care isn't like this, like icing on the cake, but it's an instrumental part of figuring out how to be successful in your studies. Yep. And I heard you mention water, meals, getting outside, exercise. Is there anything she's missing in that one?
Sleep.
That's just what I was thinking. Getting enough sleep, right? Anyone want to add to this self-care section? Go ahead, Megan.
Yeah, if there's one thing I can add to Samantha's, it's especially now that it takes a concerted effort, is the social aspect of our well-being. I find that it's very, very easy when you're very busy, where you're naturally spending a lot of time at home, to neglect your social health. So taking that into account and considering that part of your well-being sort of consciously, I think is a good idea.
Yep. And how much it can improve, it can improve your humor. And then if your humor is improved, you might want to approach the assignment more than you might have if you were just, you get to take care of yourself, and it makes you feel better. And when you feel better, you might want to do your work. Yep, it all builds. Anyone want to add anything to that? Go ahead, Ellie. Sorry.
So to build on what Samantha and Megan are saying, I think that in addition to like just being an integral part of your well-being, self-care can also help with approaching individual assignments. So for me, if I'm working on a big writing assignment or really struggling with a reading, if I just keep forcing myself to push through on that thing, I will get stuck and I will not do my best work. So I found that when that happens, I'll try to get away from my computer and do something that feels productive. For me, that's usually cooking, sometimes taking a walk. This can definitely be different things for different people, but just finding time to do something that leaves your mind free to maybe circle back to what you were working on before, but makes you feel like you were doing something productive that can, help you regain confidence, help you think through an assignment. And I'll usually find that when I come back, I notice things that I didn't before and I have more ideas and I can usually do better work.
Right. Not just plowing through, but giving yourself some space to do something else for a little while. Yeah. And Rafaela, you were going to add, and I wanted to remind you about the business you mentioned about what happens if you get into a slump. You had talked about the regrouping concept.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking of. How to attend to your mental health when you're in a real work jam. And it's like the final hour, and maybe you've procrastinated, maybe you haven't, but there's a lot to do, and whatever's going on, it's stressful. In this situation, I like to remember, it's always important to like pause for a minute, slow down and breathe. And also something that I just read, a tip was to remember that there is always enough time to get done what needs to be done. And I think that's talking about priorities that you can always, if you find yourself in a jam, you can always sit down, make a list of everything you have to do, and prioritize the super important stuff or the super close deadlines. Prioritize, figure out how to get that stuff done, and then maybe figure out a way, if you need extended deadlines for other stuff, how to get that done. But it's sort of sitting down, regrouping with a schedule that is accomplishable in the limited amount of time that you do have, and just remembering that.
I remember too, you mentioned being encouraging to yourself. I don't know if you can say something about that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really, really easy in that situation, when you're in a stressful spot, to to get down on yourself and feel bad about where you're at, and unhappy about it, or like you've made a mistake in the past. And I think that at that point, it's also like always helpful to remember, and it's easier said than done, but I always try to practice it. Remembering that in that moment, you can always start to do what you need to do or what you want to do. And you can always move forward in a way, maybe learn from your mistakes, or maybe just say, well, what I did last week wasn't my favorite style, but I'm going to try something different right now. And hopefully that'll work better. And you always have that option from where you are of making just one small choice in the future to get something done.
And not getting so down on yourself that you're paralyzed.
Right. And it doesn't necessarily say something about you. Like you can always, it it doesn't necessarily say something about you. You
Not
can
to be
take action every day.
not to be too judgmental about yourself. Right. So we're down to about 10 minutes. If one of the tutors, if there was something that came into your mind that you wanted to really say and share very briefly, then this is a good time to do it. Otherwise, we'll open it up to see if anyone has questions. Is there anything you all want to say? Go ahead, Megan.
Just really quickly about what Rafaela was talking about with that sort of regrouping. I found that I think there's something that I heard that really has helped me in general in my life, but especially I think as a student who tends to be kind of perfectionistic and very sort of like quick to be critical of myself when I don't do a good job on an assignment or I miss an assignment, is that we're always, juggling a lot of balls in the air, and inevitably you're going to drop some. And the important thing to learn is which balls are made out of plastic and which balls are made out of glass. And that to me has helped me move on, because like missing something that's, not doing a good job with something, or missing something that's worth 10% of your grade, for example, that's a glass ball. Not responding to an email in a timely manner, that's a plastic ball.
Good point. And a nice visual a way to remember it as well.